Hi everyone, it's Henry here, and in this video I'm going to be taking you through how I've painted up the new Dwarf King on Shieldbearers for my Dwarf army, and for that matter, just about everything else that's in the army. So I hope you enjoy. Let's paint. Let's take a look at this new kit. Now it's very exciting when we get a new Old World kit. The modern plastics obviously are fab, and it's wonderful to see what the sculptors are doing with them. This army's been like 30 years in the making, so I'm very excited, and I apologise if there's a bit too much of that in this video. So yeah, let's take a look. So your kit builds King or a Thane on Shieldbearers, but you can also build a separate Thane on foot. Not really any options on there other than which one you put up on the shield and which one you keep down on foot, and you can give either of them the hand weapon and shield or the great weapon. I'm going for the great weapon on mine. I love how it looks. I love the head as well, and I love the fur pelt he's got on his cloak. So that was a pretty easy decision for me. Now this dwarf army is very heavily inspired by all the dwarf stuff I loved when I was first in the hobby. So although it's not a direct imitation of old school style, a lot of the choices I'm making, particularly around colours and colour combinations stuff, is based around that. So yeah, this is pure passion project. So the stuff we get in this video probably won't be the most efficient way of painting things. I'm sorry, it's just me thoroughly enjoying myself painting some minis and bringing you along, and I hope there's the odd bit in here that you might find useful for your own stuff. This is something someone asked about in a recent video. How do I attach my miniatures to corks when I'm painting them on corks? So I drill out the feet or whatever, then a little bit of blue tack and some brass rod, and then push that in as you've seen me do on here. Obviously be careful when you're clipping brass rod and stuff. Use proper clippers, not just your sprue cutters like I am. You don't want it pinging off everywhere. But the reason I do it like this is it holds them very, very sturdy for painting. But then when it comes time to take them off those pins and put them on the base or wherever, it's nice and easy to remove them. There's no glue or anything to get stuck, so you're not having to manhandle those painted models any more than you have to. Also thought it was worth saying the sub-assemblies for the King I think are fantastic. So the cloak's completely separate, and then so's his great weapon. Now I started this project over on Patreon last week, so if you'd like to go and see a big long video where I chat about the inspiration, I go through all my different color testers and why I've chosen the colors that I've ended up with, then yeah, go and check it out. A huge thank you to those of you that support us over on Patreon. You're amazing. You allow myself and Andy to do this full time, so you get your videos over on Patreon each week, your videos over here each week. Of course, you didn't get one last week. My camera blew up last week. I'm really sorry. I was painting a Black Templars Dreadnought for last week's video, and the camera just stopped working. So I've got a new one. That's why we're back this week. But yeah, so apologies for that one. Anyway, let's get crack on with the painting. First up, the armour. Now, the armour on these miniatures, these are the sort of elite of the elite. So it's the King and the King's Guard. I want the majority of the armour on those miniatures to be this metallic green colour, so I'm going to do that on units like my Hammerers as well, but I'm also including it in smaller elements across the rest of the army, like the shields on the Longbeards and stuff like that. I'm starting off with a base coat of 50-50 mix of Necro Gold and Gharaghaks Sewer. So Necro Gold's a metallic paint by scale 75, and a sort of dark brown green gold, and then Gharaghaks Sewer is obviously a contrast paint by Games Workshop. Mix them together gives me a lovely sort of dark browny base coat for the gold. I really like the look of it. The gold in this army, I'm using the recipe I did in a recent video on the Stormcast entitled Old Gold. And for expediency, there are elements I've done for the green part of the scheme, which copies certain stages of that. So first highlight was just Necro Gold on its own. So this is just very simple top down. There's not a lot of limbs and things to work with on dwarves, not a lot of real estate. So yeah, just keep it simple. Nice top down sort of zenithal. And then same again, this time using model or metal color series gold. That's by Vallejo. All the time I'm spraying about 20 to 25 PSI, and then I'm adjusting the consistency of the paint accordingly. You're going to need to change that for your setup. I had to change this week. It's been so hot in the UK. I've dropped my pressure slightly, thinned the paints a little more, got a bit closer to the miniatures, but you're always going to have to fiddle around a bit. And for the airbrush I'm using for this project, I'm using one of our Cult of Paint signature series Infinities by Harder and Steenbeck. Check those out in the description. So it's got a 0.4mm needle and nozzle in it. One of the big reasons I love the 0.4 or a size around that is when you're spraying metallics, because those flakes, you just don't tend to get blockages and stuff, which is fab. Now the actual, clear green, just seen that. Wonder how many times I put that out with a spelling error in. Anyway, Tamiya clear green. So that gold was effectively our pre-shade, and now I'm going to use Tamiya clear green. So this is a Tamiya paint, so we need to thin it with Tamiya thinners, and I've thinned this approximately 3 drops of thinner for every 1 drop of paint. And then I'm spraying it over the gold, and I'm not looking for complete coverage on the first pass. Ideally somewhere between, say, 3 and 5 passes, letting them dry in between each coat. What this will do is it'll ensure you're not going to get sort of any areas of pooling. It ensures you don't miss out any areas, which you then have to go back and try and figure out how to match the rest. But also by letting it dry in between each stage, you start to get a lovely element of depth when you're using these clear coats, or candy coats, as you might hear people call them. It's one of the things that is a different look to just using, say, contrast paints or a thinned, heavily saturated paint or an ink or things like that. So just take your time to sort of build it up. Obviously this is a Longbeard miniature I'm working on. I had these great aspirations of having the entire army finished for you for this video. That was ambitious. But I have a unit of 21 Longbeards just waiting for pretty much their shields now, which is not shields and basing actually. So that plus the king gives me a lovely sort of base to work from. And then I've got a lot of the rest of the army built and ready to go. I've got a whole wing of gyrocopters. I've got 10 hammerers, 10 iron breakers, 5 iron drakes, that sort of thing. So I'll talk a bit more at the end of the video about this, but if you would like to see the continuation of this project over here, then please let me know in the comments. I would love to do more old world stuff for you guys and cover out our armies, but it's only worth doing if you actually want to see it. So do let me know. Then it was a case of going back in and rebase coating any of the gold elements that I'd got the green over, because this was going to be painted exactly how I did the old gold on that Stormcast video. I've decided to just put a lot more gold on the king, so certain scales and mail and stuff like that might be silver on some of the other miniatures, but I've tried to keep loads of gold on the king. So say it's basically just 3 colours, green, silver and gold, in different quantities across my army, and I think it's going to look pretty cool for the amount of effort it takes to actually paint them. I will say it can be a bit of a pain in the bum trying to paint over the top of that clear green coat, so it's very, very glossy, so the paint doesn't really want to stick to it. And again, the weather's been really warm here in England the last couple of weeks, and the paints, it's not the nicest environment to be painting in at the moment. I'm not going to complain about it because it won't last very long, but it's that coupled with the glossy finish made it a bit tedious trying to get the some of the base coats on. And then the silver, very simple, 50-50 mix, burnt iron, iron warriors. So that's partly for fluidity using the burnt iron, and then the colours more or less the same. And then I'm just using Ratling Grime here as a wash. If you've watched my videos recently, I would say probably the last 6 months, this is now my go-to sort of dark silver recipe. For the silver elements, any silver on the model, so the mail, the chainmail, the scale mail, the weapons, anything like that, I'm giving an oil wash of raw umber. This is Winsor & Newton Artist Oil Colour. So this is their sort of higher end paint, but you can still get it in most art shops, but it's a better quality paint than things like their Winton range. I really like using it. I've had this tube for like 10, 12, 15 years, something like that now. So yeah, if you're a bit put off by the price, don't be. It's really good quality and it'll last you forever. And I'm just thinning it down with mineral spirits into a wash consistency. And I would say this is more or less identical consistency to something like your Gharaghaks shade and whatnot. Then for the gold and the green elements on the models, I've slightly simplified the oil wash I used in the old gold video. That one was a sort of one-off mix that I made. A little bit here, a little bit there. This I've tried to be a lot more specific, and it's 1 to 1 to 1 Industrial Earth, Olive Green, and Sepia by Absalom 502. And if you need to adjust it to your own taste, by all means do. Now, this is a much thicker wash than the previous one, so you can see that on the plastic sprue there. Hopefully that gives you an idea of consistency I was using for this. And the reason I wanted the thicker wash is because I want more of the oil to stain the surface, start to give me that lovely shading that oil paint can do. And because I'm going over the fairly glossy clear green, I haven't bothered varnishing any of this. As long as the paint's dry, you're not going to get any issues. But that glossy green, it makes it run into the recesses very, 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 very easily. And metallics, obviously, they tend to be a bit glossier and shinier, so they certainly encourage this sort of oil wash technique where you want it to sort of capillary action, pull it into the recesses more so than the flat areas of the panel. Now, for the sleeves, I didn't realise these were on the model. I didn't realise they weren't armour. I'd been painting loads of my other dwarfs, and they don't have that because they're older sculpts. They just don't have this level of detail on. I'm in love with these new dwarf miniatures. It makes me very sad that we haven't got a whole new range like this, but they're lovely and they work well with those 8th Ed dwarf minis we got anyway. But I thought, right, okay, I've got to put some cloth in here, some fabric. And I thought, well, I really like red. It's an old-fashioned, retro kind of inspired colour. Red and green can look a bit Christmassy, but sod it, I want to go with it. And I was searching through the bag of reds trying to find what I wanted, and I just couldn't. So I've just used our reds that are coming out soon for our paint range. That's why I haven't listed them. I'm sorry I'm using paints you can't buy, but this is my army, and I want it to look how I want it to look. So yeah, hopefully we'll talk to you more about those very soon. So next up, we've got the leather bits. So I wanted to keep the leather fairly boring. You can see the armour here is more or less done bar its final highlight. I'm not going to do lots of battle damage and chipping and stuff like that. I want that slightly more classic vibe to them. And for me, that is a slightly cleaner look in my head. I think we've all got different interpretations, right? But yeah, I didn't want these to be heavily battle damaged or anything. And because the colours are, I think, quite strong, quite pure on the armour and on the fabric, I thought, right, I'll keep the leather elements fairly dull, fairly boring, because that'll let me play with more colours elsewhere. And I just went for Thondia Brown and then started mixing in Steel Legion Drab. I'd meant to use the recipe that I did on the the Leagues of Votan Jaeger model a few months back now. But I was chatting away to Andy on the phone as I was doing this, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't Thondia and Steel. I need to go back and check, actually. I think it might have been Mournfang and Steel Legion. But anyway, a boring brown. And then I've gone in with Rhinox Hide here, just glazing that down the sort of centre of the larger straps to add a little bit of depth to it. Yeah, because I thought I was just a little bit too light. And then because this is a character miniature, I'm spending a little bit of extra time. So I go back in with the Steel Legion Drab and just do a few little extra scritches and scratches here and there. But yeah, this is still army painting, Yes, it's the character model. It's the main character model. But I don't want to get bogged down. And also I like generally to paint my characters the same as I paint the rest of my troops, and just rely on the fact that there's more details on them to help set them apart. So there isn't really anything here I'm doing that I wouldn't be doing just on a basic long beard or whatever that, if the model had that on it. Now, I wasn't quite sure what to do his Book of Grudges with colour-wise. Again, I didn't want it to draw too much attention, but it is quite an important, element of the miniature. And again, a super cool bit of the sculpt. The 3 Shieldbearers are just wonderful, wonderful minis. So I thought, okay, let's go for a really sort of a purpley black. And I dug out a paint I haven't used in years, I don't think anyway. Black leather by Scale 75. And I just started doing loads of scratches and scratches. Then I mixed in a little, probably Rakarth Flesh, whatever a lighter paint was I had on the palette. I just mixed that in and started doing more scratches and scratches. Just like you do sort of on your leather. And it was a little bit in your face, as you can see here. That's going to happen right when you lighten your purple up. It's going to go a bit pinky. So just a couple of glazes back down with the black leather to see if that would help. But I didn't like it. Didn't look right. And it's an important bit of the mini. And what I think didn't look right was I'd used too big a brush. I was getting used to the new camera. I wasn't probably in as most comfortable position as I could have been. Yeah, it just didn't work. It wasn't accurate enough. So I went in and redid the whole process, but using a sponge instead, because this will effectively give me tons of tiny little scratches, and was a bit easier. And I figured, you know what, if I have to go back in and just touch up that brown leather bit or touch up the sleeve, it's no big deal to go and do that, and then worth it to get it right. So yeah, you can see exactly the same process. And then once we'd blacked out all the details around it, you can see sort of how that sits in there with the rest of the mini. Yeah, really happy with that. I think it's something that if I was to do a large piece of leather again in the future, I would like to pursue that recipe and fiddle around with it a little bit. So, skin. There isn't a huge amount of it, so might as well get it right. A bit more on these guys because they've got more arms on show than a lot of the old kits. But when I was doing my testers, I found that doing the skin before I did the beards was key, just because it's quite messy. Or the way I was painting it was quite messy. So the first thing I did was grab some Rakarth Flesh, really thin down, just sort of wash that in over the skin, just to give me a lighter base coat to work from. And then similar consistency, I used Night Questor Flesh here, a couple of almost wash consistency coats, just to give me a base to work from. And then African Shadow, so a dark sort of purpley brown colour, just again washed into the recesses like the eye sockets, around the nose, that kind of area. And then where he's got actual skin on show, so the King's pretty hardcore, he's just basically going in the t-shirt, just start to glaze that in on the muscles. And then for the skin, I just grabbed a bunch of different colours I thought looked quite good for sort of that slightly ruddy, classic kind of dwarfen flesh colour. Popped them on the palette and just started fiddling around and painting them on the model. I think a video to talk about painting skin, this is not the miniature to do that on. In fact, Andy did a really lovely one a few weeks ago on Stormcast miniature, which has got a great skin tutorial on it. We've got 3 or 4 other skin tutorials on here. Yes, you're probably using a Space Marine head, but they're applicable to anything. And then it's an element that Andy covers very often over on Patreon, because he paints a lot of these larger scale miniatures where you have an awful lot more real estate to work with, and the skin becomes incredibly nuanced and interesting and important, and a lot of that becomes applicable to your smaller scale stuff as well. So if you fancy more deep dives on that, go check that out on miniatures that aren't teeny tiny. And here I am popping in some eyeballs. I thought I'd film it, and then turns out it wasn't really in focus, which is a shame. But all I can say with the eyeballs is I find that try and make them both off center, so try and make sure the model's looking left or looking right, and generally you don't end up looking too cross-eyed. Now, one of the most important elements of the mini, the beards. So for me, I wanted to spend a decent portion of the amount of time that I was painting these miniatures on the beards, and the armor was nice and simple, quite airbrushed, airbrushed and washed, nice and simple. I wanted the beards to look brush painted. I wanted that to be able to see some brush strokes on the miniature, not texture and stuff from the paint, which was a real challenge with some of these colours in this heat, but just to look properly, painted, as it were. So what I'm going to do is leave the entire process I've done for painting the King's beard in here, and then I'll do the other recipes that I've used for the other coloured beards as well, but just to hopefully give you guys an idea of how long it takes. So I base coated it using Thondia Brown over black, and then I'm slowly adding in a colour called Japanese Uniform. This is my blonde beards. I was going to give him a white beard, but I thought I'd save that for the White Dwarf Mini, which I've got built and ready to go as well. So yeah, just start adding in Japanese Uniform to that mix, and then begin highlighting. And you'll see here I'm highlighting the areas of his beard that are facing upwards, that would catch the light as if the light was shining down on him. So it's not just a case of leaving recesses dark and then the most prominent parts brighter. It's more to do with how they are in relation to that to the light that's falling down on them. And it takes a little while, and the paint here is very thin. You know, we're talking maybe a touch thicker than a normal acrylic wash. So because of that, do it on the palette, touch it off on a little piece of paper or your finger or something like that, just to make sure the brush isn't absolutely loaded with it. And you're going to have to go back to the palette very often. And again, because of the weather at the minute, the paint was drying very, very quickly. I know I could have used something like drying retarder, possibly. It's not something I'm particularly familiar working with. So I'd rather just use water here, work how I often work, and just be resigned to the fact it was going to be a little trickier. It might take me a little bit longer. And what I tried to do was leave things like the beards until relatively late in the evening when it's a bit cooler, and came in and did it. And you can see all I'm doing is just gradually adding a little bit more Japanese uniform to the mix, and then going back and, say, working on those areas that are facing upwards. And sometimes that means pushing my brush upwards and into that area, and sometimes it means starting my brush right close up against the crease and then pulling it down and just start to create a little bit of those sort of brush strokes and that suggested idea of hair and stuff. But I will shut up for a bit now and hopefully chat to you if you're watching this live on the premiere. Let me know as well whether it's worth leaving in things like this in real time and in full. I thought it was, and it was fairly nicely in focus, which makes a change. So that's why I've gone with it. So yeah, I hope that was useful. For the black beard, I've gone with Petroleum Grey. Lovely, lovely purpley grey colour from Scale 75. I have heard people are having issues getting hold of scale paints recently. So yeah, just go with a brand you can get. I suppose the only answer, and if they haven't got an equivalent, then either mix one up or just maybe consider, you know, hunting it out if you really want that really want that particular colour. And then I lightened that using Reddish Grey by AK. And then for the brown beards, based it up using Rhinox Hide, lovely old Rhinox Hide I should say, and then mixing in Mournfang Brown to highlight it with. The beard sculpts are so cool on these Shieldbearers, like where they're long, they sort of tuck it in their belt around the back. It's honestly, I can't tell you enough good things about these sculpts. They were an absolute joy from the second I built them, clicked them off the sprue to finish painting them. Yeah, just a real treat. So I'm very happy for you dwarf collectors. If you like them, you won't be disappointed. Yeah, I would gladly buy this kit again and paint it again. I just think it's brilliant. And now, well, I suppose it's time for the other bits really. And the king, he has a few more sort of extra bits and bobs on him. The first thing is his cloak, and I really wasn't quite sure what to do with this one. It needed to be special, but I didn't want it to detract from the rest of the mini. So my go-to with that normally is just paint it black. So I went for black. I went for Petroleum Grey as the highlight, mixed in the Reddish Grey, just like I did for the beard actually, on the inside of the cloak to see how that looked. And then I thought, oh well, if it's okay and I can be a bit more daring, I'll do a different colour on the back of him. So I use my airbrush to effectively be the light source that's shining on his cloak. So we're picturing it as we're looking at it here, it's coming from the right hand side. So any surface that's facing towards that right hand side is going to be lit up, and any one that's facing away will be in shadow. And then I go back in with my black to just bring the shadows back. Now, because I'm using very thin paint, you can see there it hit the model and spidered off very quickly. So I should have lowered the pressure there, took a bit more time. Otherwise, because I've got that little tide mark now, so I will need to go back in and essentially just redo every step that I've previously done. It doesn't take 2 minutes, but just worth saying, you're not going to make it disappear. Just go back in, Petroleum Grey, bit of Reddish Grey in there, and then repeat the process. And then I thought it looked pretty cool, and I liked that little touch of purple in there, so I thought, well, he's royal. I think he should have some purple on him. Purple and green do look good together. Let's give it a go. So for the back of his cloak, and again, beautifully sculpted, lots of lovely big folds, very easy to build, build and paint as a sub-assembly, and easy to paint the front and the back separately, as it were, without overspray, and no molded like trim and stuff on it, so it's over the moon. And there's hardly any of it because the pelt's covering most of it. And in the end, I went for a mix of Sigvald Burgundy and Luxion Purple. Contrast paints, just blasted them over, tiny drop of thinner in the airbrush with them. It's pretty full on. I don't hate it. I'm also kind of, at the minute, I'm kind of glad you can't see it from the front of the minis, which I don't know if it's a good thing or not. See, I think you look at him from behind, I think that looks pretty cool in and of itself. I'm just not 100% convinced it works okay with the rest of the mini. It might do, and who knows, by the time this video goes up I might have completely changed my mind, but I don't hate it enough to derail the project and stop the momentum. So it's purple, it's nicely executed, it's fine, move on. And then I glued the cloak and everything in place, and then I had to go back and do the gold detailing. I felt that doing the gold detailing, like these sort of medallion type things he's got going around him, like the mayor has, that's or whatever that's called, I felt they were easier to do first and then do the pelt afterwards, because if I got the grey paint over the gold, it would be easier to touch that up than vice versa. So that was my reasoning with doing it that way around. And then the pelt I've painted very similarly to the beards. This is in fact the recipe I'm using or have used on my long beards. So it's dark sea grey, add dawnstone, and then add Ulthuan Grey to highlight it. And again, just a very similar idea, trying to hit those areas that are facing upwards, not just the ones that are more prominent. The only extra thing here was I tried to make sure that those folds, you see where they're lighter in the purple, tried to ensure that they would be a little bit brighter on the pelt as well. So that was just a case of going in and just making sure everything's sort of on that line, just a little bit lighter in value than the ones in the deepest recesses. This one was really tough because of the heat. White paint generally is a bit of a, pest to work with quite often. Ulthuan Grey isn't the nicest either, or mine isn't anyway. A little bit grainy. So I was trying to keep it mega thin so it stayed smooth. But it was just, not ideal. But we don't let it, like I say, don't let it derail you. This is not a display miniature. This isn't for a competition or anything like that. It's just a cool mini to kickstart a project I've wanted to do for 30 years. So yeah, let's just move on. It's the right color choice. It looks beautiful on the long beards that I did last week when the weather was fine. So yeah, not going to worry about it. So yeah, just adding in Ulthuan Grey there. You notice I'm getting smaller and smaller with my brushes. There's nothing wrong. If you need to use a smaller brush to do detail work, use it. Some people can do it with massive brushes, good for them, but I can't. And if you can't, then don't worry about or feel ashamed of using a smaller brush. So that's what I've gone for there. And then last up is, the finishing touches, really. I said I didn't want to do a blow-by-blow of absolutely everything on these miniatures, just the important parts. Most of it's quite simple, and you've probably got your own recipes for many of those bits. So essentially it was put the miniatures together now and just go in, touch up any of the elements of the skin that I needed to touch up. On the gold here, I'm doing that final highlight like we do in the old gold video, which I will have linked anyway, so you'll be able to have a look. And just make sure sort of if I have done any sort of light source type stuff, it matches up, doesn't look too silly. And just all those key important parts, just make sure they're spot on. And ideally try and film them when you're up against a really tight deadline in really hot weather on camera. It's definitely the most relaxing way to get them done. And here's the lads. Now, when I glued these lads under the shield, one of their feet was touching the ground. So there was a few choice words and a bit of judicious bending of miniatures to get them all leveled out. I'm not going to cover the basing in this video because I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do with it yet. It's going to be this, but it might be a slight tweak on this. And again, if you'd like to see more on this army, then let me know in the comments and I will happily do a basing video for it. So yeah, that's the king and his Shieldbearers done. I say done. I guess 95% done. I would like to spend a little bit more time on them, because he's a centerpiece model. But I've run out of time, and I needed to get the video out for it. Everything I've done would stay as it is. I would just go in and tweak the odd bit. So I would like to perhaps get the gems. Maybe a touch, maybe one more highlight on the gems, just to create a little bit more of that sort of reflective idea on them. I might go in and fiddle around with the skin. To be honest with you, I think with that you just need to go, it's good enough and move on. I'm happy with all the eyes. I managed to get the eyeballs in, and everyone doesn't, looks like they're doing something. I would like to do a bit more on the base as well, but this is all little things, and I feel very positive that I want to go in and push it, because as I said, this is a project I've wanted to do since I was like 11 or something. It's done it again. Left my phone on again. Unbelievable. What's going on, eh? Right, let's turn that one off. So, yeah. I say it's something I've wanted to do since I was young, and I can't tell you how happy. Well, I am telling you how happy I've been throughout this process. It's just been a joy. The entire thing has just been a joy, and has reminded me, and this might sound a bit soppy, but it's reminded me of why I like painting minis and why I did it in the first place as a hobby. It was relaxing, it was creative, it was everything I wanted from the hobby. And yeah, I'm just itching to do more on the dwarves. So hopefully, if you would like to see more on the dwarf army, and you'd like to see more on my solar auxiliary army, which will be my two personal projects for the rest of the year, let me know, because I'd love to do some update videos on them. But I am conscious of not just giving you, the same content again and again. But there's some elements for the dwarf army I would really like. I want to convert up my own slayers that fit the aesthetic, or my aesthetic, a bit better. I'd like to convert up some Rangers, things like that. So yeah, do let me know on that. And let me know what you think. Let me know if it's kind of got them classic vibes for you as well. I hope it does. We're all different, but hopefully it strikes a chord with a few of you. Yeah, I just wanted to say a big thank you as well to, I'm very lucky to have in my sort of hobby group, Dan and Tom from 9 Inch Charge, which is a Warhammer Fantasy podcast over on YouTube, and check them out. So they've got me absolutely frothing over all of it, and I've been consuming a ton of great sort of dwarf content from all the various creators. I particularly enjoyed an interview with Gav Thorpe, that Stu did over on Miniature Realms. So if you're a big dwarf fanatic, and I kind of feel like you aren't a casual dwarf fan, there's no such thing. Yeah, go and check that out. So that was really lovely to hear from, so obviously an absolute champ of dwarf stuff over there. But yeah, as always, if you've got any questions about anything I've done in the video, pop them down in the comments and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks ever so much for all of your support. Take care, and I'll see you next time. If you've liked any of the models in this video and you fancy having an army of them yourself, but perhaps you don't have the time or wherewithal to get it done, consider dropping us an email at commissions@cultofpaint.com.